Um, I'm Tom. I'm a market researcher, which I think is slightly unusual at tech conferences. And I'm also, as I was just proving, a newbie. I'm a newbie in Berlin. It's my first visit to the city, and I'm really enjoying it. This is also the first time I've ever spoken at a tech conference. I've spoken at quite a few market research ones. So it's been an exciting experience. I've almost been decapitated by that monster, but I've survived that, and here I am. And as a noob, I do noobish things. A lot of this presentation is going to be about being a newbie and the kind of decisions newbies make. So I go to see the sites in Berlin, and I also start my presentation with a quote from this guy. It's not the consumer's job to know what he wants. Now, actually, this quote didn't make Steve Jobs a very popular person among market researchers, and he said a lot of other very rude things about market research. He basically thought it was useless. Apple still did an awful lot of market research, but Steve Jobs was publicly very rude about it. And the thing was, the problem for us market researchers is that Steve Jobs was exactly right. In fact, he didn't go far enough. Not only is it not the consumer's job to know what he wants, even if it was the consumer's job to know what they want, they would do a pretty awful job of it. They simply wouldn't know. But luckily, while it may not be the market researcher's job to find out what people want, it is definitely the market researcher's job to find out how people behave. And there's been no body of work more useful in finding out how people behave in recent years than this one by Daniel Kahneman, summarized in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which came out last year. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist. He didn't win the Nobel Prize for psychology. I don't think there is one. He won it for economics. And this is because his work has kind of revolutionized how people think about how other people make decisions. And he posits, he uses a metaphor for how the brain works, that there are two systems of consciousness. There's system 1 decision-making, which is fast, instinctive, not a lot of effort. There's system 2 decision-making, and system 2 is what happens when you actually feel yourself thinking, kind of acting cognitively. And system 2 decision-making is an awful lot slower. The other important things about System 1 and System 2 is that System 1 decisions are an awful lot more powerful. When you engage System 2, you're really having to strain. It feels like quite a lot of effort. And System 1 decisions you also make an awful lot more often. Most decisions you make, in fact, are System 1. They're kind of instinctive. So here's an example of the two systems in action. Can you tell what this is in the picture? This being a tech crowd, you might very well be able to. But most people can't until they see this. And it suddenly becomes extremely clear what it is in the picture. It's a man moving, or a woman moving. You can actually tilt it so it kind of moves in a more feminine fashion, a bit slinkier, and you can make them a little bit more relaxed, and you can come up with all sorts of... oh, no, that's nervous, not relaxed, gosh. Anyway, you can come up with all sorts of ways. But what's happening there is that initially, you access your System 1 starts working, and it starts saying, what is this? And you don't kind of know. Well, what is it? Is it a map? Is it a constellation? Is it a set of random dots? And then, as soon as you see the man, bang, System 1, the fast one, comes in, makes a decision. OK, it's a person moving. We know about that. And then it becomes really, really difficult to unsee it. You have to actually engage your System 2 again, think very kind of effortfully and cognitively to unsee it. So to kind of summarize an enormous amount of excellent work done by Kahneman in this, System 1 decisions are fast, they're implicit, they're based on experience rather than analysis, they're very instinctive, potentially even unconscious, and they're quite often triggered by emotional feelings rather than thinking things through. And System 2 decisions, on the other hand, are slow, they're explicit, they're analytical, you're kind of engaging your brain and thinking. They're more cognitive, you notice yourself doing them, they're more conscious, and you're making more of an effort doing them. And to go back to Steve Jobs' complaint, when you ask people what they want, or indeed what they do or what they have done, usually what happens is that they will actually engage System 2. They'll give you a conscious, measured, analytic response, which doesn't, unfortunately, reflect the majority of decisions that we take, which is System 1. So how do we kind of work with this as people who want to understand why people make decisions, which everyone involved in web media and online media does, the decisions that they're trying to understand, the behavior they're trying to understand involves, clicking, reading, sharing, all these kind of good things. That's a quote from, I always forget that quote's there. That's a quote from Antonio Damasio, he's a neuroscientist, and he kind of summing it up. We're not thinking machines that feel, we're feeling machines that think. Emotion comes first, and that'll be important later on. One of the things that we've done at the company I work at is we've kind of looked at the factors that influence these System 1 decisions, these fast, quick, implicit, unconscious decisions that you can't really ask people about. And we've packaged them into kind of the choice environment, the environment that you're there, that's around you when you're making your choice in the moment of decision. The social environment, the people around you, the people that you might be copying or reacting to, and the kind of stuff that's going on in your own head, the emotions you're feeling. Are you happy? Are you maybe hot or thirsty or cold? These kind of things tend to be much more important, actually, than the sort of more considered, conscious decision-making. And so what we kind of try to do as researchers is maybe hack the contexts a bit. And there's a whole, to do this, we kind of draw inspiration from a whole body of psychological literature. So here's an example of environmental factors. This is an off-license. It's a British shop that sells wine. It sells both French and German wine at the same price. And the only thing that changes in these two experiments is the background music that's playing. Here is some lovely French music, and when the French music is playing in the background, sales of wine are 5-to-1 in favor of the French. When the German music is playing in the background, sales of wine are 2-to-1 in favor of the German. So, and you could imagine this happening with other products, beer maybe. If you want them to buy lager, put on some Schlager. It also works in terms of the social environment. You can also kind of hack the social environment, make some changes to the context there. This is a German railway carriage. And what we see is that it's selling pretzels. There's a pretzel salesman on board. That's all you need to know. When there's no accomplice eating pretzels, when no one's been planted there eating pretzels, we see that 1 in 12 passengers buy pretzels. When, however, someone walks through the carriage eating pretzels, that's all they're doing, 1 in 7 people buy pretzels. And when there's someone sitting down perpetually eating pretzels, it goes up to 1 in 6. So that's more than doubled, just by having somebody wandering through eating a pretzel. Because we're a species that really likes to copy. We like to copy other people. We don't necessarily know we're doing it. None of the people would admit, oh, yes, I bought the German wine because German music was playing. They'd think you were a fool if you admitted that. But that's kind of why they did. And it's the same with the pretzels. And this even applies to people who really, really, really should be making conscious, considered decisions. This example comes from a year-long study done of Israeli judges. And these judges are having to make very, very important decisions. They're making decisions about whether to let criminals out of prison. They're parole judges. So each of these parole appeals, you know, the study examined them over the course of the year, and they found a pattern. They found that something was causing the rate of parole decisions to slump and then peak, slump and then peak. And this is the favorable decision. So it was having a really important effect on whether these people were getting out of prison. What was it? Well, it turned out to be meal times. The case number across the day was having a huge effect. Essentially, when the judges were hungry, they were far, far less likely to let people get out of prison than when they weren't. And what Kahneman says about this is he says that the performance of more effortful tasks will collapse under cognitive load. As soon as your System 2 decision-making, which, remember, isn't very powerful, it's this tiny kind of old-school microcomputer compared to the enormous giant supercomputer that is your System 1. Your System 2 decision-making process starts kind of collapsing, and you resort to the default, the easiest decision, which in this case is not letting the people out. So what does this have to do with the internet? Well, the internet was originally a kind of temple of System 2 decision-making. John Perry Barlow in 1996 called it a civilization of the mind. And this is around when I got onto the internet, 94, 95. And the great cry at the time, if you did something stupid, if you kind of trusted your instinct and did something, was read the fucking manual. Basically, not only did they kind of build it around this access to rational information, they also thought that you could outsource this rational information and we would all be good decision makers and go along and fully familiar ourselves with the information before making decisions. But these people, people who wanted to build a civilization of the mind, had an enemy, and the enemy was newbies. And they really, really didn't like newbies. This is a fantastic Twitter account. I recommend you follow it. It's essentially just snippets of text from the early web, which give you some idea of the kind of conflicts and bring web history to life, 140 characters at a time. And this is this howl of rage against the new users. What are they going to do? They're going to ask stupid questions. They're going to not learn the rules. But the problem is that the newbies won. And the reason they won isn't just that they had numbers on their side, though certainly they did, but it's also they had System 1 decision-making. When you start looking at web media from back then, you start seeing some kind of very obvious patterns emerging. This is a pretty obvious example to use, but the Alta Vista homepage in 1999, just when Google launched, just when Google swept this whole school of search engine design and portal design away, basically, is kind of a temple to cognitive reasoned thinking. It's making the assumption, it's placing its bets on the idea that we will come and we'll see a range of options and we'll want a range of options and we'll think carefully about which one we actually want to choose and we'll go for it. Google, on the other hand, is saying, no, get in there, type in your thing, look, bright colors, hooray, put it in there, and they've even got I'm feeling lucky. And there's all sorts of excellent kind of rationalizations about why Google was successful and such like, and that it returned better search results, it was faster, and so on. But I think that an enormous chunk of it was the fact that it made such a strong appeal to your System 1, to your kind of fast, intuitive, emotional decision-making. And this is still going on. One of the big things that's really exciting marketers at the moment, especially in my profession where we're always a bit late to these things, is Pinterest. And people are saying, well, why is Pinterest so popular? And I think that you don't need to look much further than its login process, where you see these kind of factors, these kind of personal factors, but then also the choice environment and the social factors very, very, very strongly. Here's an extremely easy, intuitive interface. You can see exactly how much how much you're letting yourself in for. But then the really clever stuff begins on the next page of the login process, where it automatically follows people that you think you'll like. And this is triggering the social thing. We like to copy other people, and here are lots of other people to copy. Twitter doesn't do this. Tumblr doesn't do this. It may suggest other people. It may give you kind of examples of good uses. Pinterest just goes, bang, you're following these people. You can work out how to unfollow them if you want. There's little buttons and such like, but the default is that you follow them. And then, even more fiendishly, Pinterest says, right, we're going to give you, we're going to hack the choice environment that you've got. We're going to alter your choice environment. And instead of you having the idea of what pinboards you create, it creates them for you. And you can see why marketers adore Pinterest, because the very first pinboard that it says, oh, I want you to create is products I love, which probably no one would kind of think, oh, top of mind, yes, what do I most want to create? Products I love. But they're making them opt out. They're tapping into your System 1 decision-making. So, of course, one of the things is that the web is actually, and web media is way in front of offline in this. It's an area where post-digital is disappearing, but it isn't that the web was this kind of strange thing and it's now kind of, catching up and integrating with the real world. In many ways, actually, the real world is having to kind of desperately try to catch up and integrate with the web. The web is a temple of metrics, user analytics, split testing, user testing. It knows more about its users' behavior and its decisions than almost any other media ever. So what can it learn from research, from the idea of System 1 and System 2 decision-making? Can it still learn something? Well, I think yes, it can. One important thing it can learn is the role of emotion. If you remember, most System 1 decisions are triggered by emotion, how people are feeling. They're not necessarily rational conscious. System 2 is engaged to explain them, to post-rationalize them. So you feel kind of momentarily sad about something, you make your decision based on your sadness, and then you kind of come in and say, well, of course it was because it was a higher price, or of course it was because this and this and this. But actually, the emotion turns out to be a better predictor often of effectiveness when you look into emotion for research. And most of the metrics that web sites and web analytics are based on aren't terribly emotional. They're to do with behavior, which is an excellent way of looking at things. But they don't tell you much about the behavior after people leave the site. They don't tell you much about the experience that the site has left you with, about the kind of emotion that is being felt when you kind of return to that site or come back to it or use the app or what have you. So a kind of greater focus maybe on the role of emotion is one way to use these insights. And I think it's going to become increasingly important, because it seems to me that what's coming up is an issue where not only can we influence decisions, do we kind of offer people fast, fun, and easy decisions that they can make easily with their System 1 brains. You can actually now remove and automate the decision entirely, and this is happening behind the scenes more and more often. So you get many more kind of automated, automatic decisions. And a really important question over the next 5 years is, how far will people go? At what point do people think, actually, this is creepy if I'm being auto-followed to things? If I'm, if my fridge, to use this trope which has come up again and again over these 2 days, if my fridge has ordered milk for me, is that useful? Is it creepy? And this is where I think, understanding what consumers want may be a dead issue by asking them. But asking them maybe about how they feel could still be useful. Thank you.